Hello everyone, my name is Jordan Norell, and today I want to do a little review of the book Children's Justice, written by my best friend, Brendon Marotta. So let me read for you first the review which I've written out, and then I'll talk a little bit more about it. So here goes. Children's justice is a historic achievement, the beginning of a revolution in our treatment of the most oppressed class in history. In his groundbreaking new book, Brendon Marotta pulls no punches in illuminating the most important social justice issue ever explored. The children's justice revolution is not only the most important social justice movement of all time, but is in fact the more important than all other social justice movements combined. And children's justice shows why. Critical social justice is taking over the world, dominating universities, businesses, nonprofits, and progressive politics, and if the movement to transform the lives of children is going to have any success, it is essential that children's justice activists understand and apply the theory underlying modern social justice movements. Critical theory. Critical theory is a tool for not only analyzing, but transforming oppressive social institutions using language. When activists seek to express the horror and inconceivable injustice of infant genital mutilation, the most extreme children's issue, and its effects, and are denied not only the language to do so, but even a frame of reference in which their personal experience is considered valuable, these activists are experiencing profound epistemic and hermeneutic injustice. By internalizing the framework of critical social justice, a framework which medical institutions have already explicitly accepted as valid, and more important than their own medical advice, children's justice gives activists a language and toolkit for dismantling and deconstructing systems which have oppressed, abused, and dehumanized children since the dawn of civilization. No longer can children be used for the callous whims of adults. Instead, it becomes clear that the fate of all social justice movements, and perhaps of civilization itself, rests on love, liberation, healing, and profound attunement, for both the inner oppressed child within each adult and for the children of the world. Critical social justice has shifted the definition of racism from individual bias to participation in oppressive systems which perpetually create injustice for minorities. What really matters now is not so much individual racism, but systemic racism. Now, Marotta has convincingly shown that harming children for the pleasure of adults is not mainly a problem of individual pedophilia, but of systemic pedophilia, a problem which permeates all of society. If we are to raise children who learn love rather than oppression, and hence grow into adults who practice love rather than oppression, there is only one question left. Will you be a pedophile or an anti-pedophile? There is no neutrality. Children's justice shows the path forward. So, I think I may have just been the first person to ever say the words children's justice, anti-pedophile, and systemic pedophilia on camera. As far as I know, Brendon was the first one to coin these words, as well as the word, did I say children's justice? Yeah, children's justice. I mean, I coined the word, I said it first, and then he stole it from me. Not that I, hate him for it or anything, but, no, Brendon fully credits me with the term. He was telling me, he was like, Jordan, I'm writing this book, it's so awesome. It's basically applying critical social justice theory to children's issues, to circumcision specifically. And I'm like, oh, like children's justice? And he's like, yes, I like that. Can I use that? And I'm like, sure. So it's exciting. This book is really exciting, as you can tell from my review, hopefully. I'm trying to express that it's literally more important than everything else in the world put together, if that didn't come across. Because, I mean, so let me just riff here for a minute. I wrote a chapter in my book that's coming out about how basically, if you if you protect children, if you love children, if you take care of children, those children grow into be adults who are good people, right? You only get adults who are abusive and oppressive and create systems of abuse and oppression if these adults are treating oppressively as children, and that has happened throughout all of human history, right? Brendon gives the example of the British, who had an extremely abusive system to children, which was very effective in raising children to be smart and intelligent, but also very effective in raising them to be brutal. And they became an incredibly brutal global power that dominated and terrorized the world. It's called colonialism, in case you haven't heard of it. I think the British mostly invented it, or certainly popularized it. And so it comes all based in child abuse, and that's this idea of, what was the word used, psychohistory, kind of examines all of history through this lens. And anyways, I think what's really exciting about this book is it explores this idea that the most important thing is how we treat children, and how we treat children determines how adults treat each other. And the most important social justice issue for children is probably, I would say it's certainly towards the top, is non-consensual genital cutting of children. And Brendon really pulls no punches, and so I'm telling you guys, he goes really in depth into all of the reasons that circumcision is horrible. Like, if you took out just the parts about circumcision, male genital cutting, and put those together in just a much smaller book. This book's about 100,000 words. He hits every point. He hits all of the most important points of why circumcision is genital mutilation, is the most horrible thing you can do to another human being, and it's really powerfully convincing. And he has many hundreds of sources, thousands even, definitely many hundreds of sources to back up every claim that he makes with evidence. So it's a scholarly book. It's very intellectual, and it's certainly a tour de force of the intellect, and it really goes into explaining all of the different ways that critical social justice theory, which is the theory again which applies to Black Lives Matter and to modern gender theory and to all of this stuff, when you hear diversity, equity, inclusion, when you hear microaggressions, and when you hear people using certain pronouns and saying, hey, these are my pronouns, this stuff all comes from this critical social justice. And so it's very dominant right now, right? These are protests that are dominating the news. These are ideas that are dominating public discussion. And by bringing those same ideas and applying them to children's issues, Brendon, what I really like is that in this book, he's basically saying why aren't these ideas, which are so important and so powerful, why haven't they been applied to the most important group of all groups? Right? Everyone can agree that children are important. It's a non-partisan issue. Children are the most important thing. There's not really any debate about that. And yet somehow, he goes into other issues a little bit as well, like compulsory schooling. We can literally lock up children in a government building for 10 hours a day and brainwash them and force them to do whatever we want them to do, with them having no right to their own time, their own experience, their own determination of their lives. If we did that to any other group, right? If we did that to women, or if we did that to black people, or if we did that to whatever, trans people or something, lock them in a building for 10 hours a day and brainwash them and tell them they have to do what we want them to do, or we're going to punish them for it and permanently alter their futures, put it on their permanent record, exclude them from society if they don't do whatever we want them to do, send them to juvenile hall. It's crazy, right? It's crazy what we actually do to kids, and we don't think about it. And there's a lot of institutions built around this idea that children are not really human beings; they're not really people. And so, this is a book whose time has come. Let me go through. Oh my God, I have so many notes here. I'm not going to go through all of these. These are notes I sent to Brendon for the review copy of the book. Buy the book, read the book. I know it's a lot, but it's one of the most important books ever written. Truly, really, really, truly, it's a historic achievement. And yeah, so I talked a little bit about systemic pedophilia and anti-pedophilia, which is this idea that children are essentially used for the pleasure of adults. And it's a little bit triggering of an idea like, hey, you're a systemic pedophile. You're a pedophile. But that's kind of the idea. That's kind of the idea behind a lot of critical theory. It's meant to be triggering, or it's meant to be activating. It's meant to activate your emotions. And so there are a few worse insults in the world, or worse labels to be labeled with, than being a pedophile. And racist is another really bad one. And it's interesting because the definition of racism has shifted over time. And it no longer just means I am physically attacking you or discriminating against you or doing something to you because you are a different race than me. It now actually means I'm participating in a system that systemically privileges certain groups over other groups. And even just by participating in that system and acting as though that system is good and right and normal, we are normalizing the fact that certain groups in society, because of history and because of the way things have been set up over time, are naturally at the bottom of society, right? For example, minorities own it's something like 1/10 the amount of wealth that white families own in the United States. They don't have any ownership of wealth. It's actually really insane. So that's just an example of how systemically, because of historical forces, and then the laws and the system and everything that keeps that in place and keeps it the way it is and keeps certain groups privileged through hiring practices, through norms, through ways of thinking, through language, is one of the big things in arguments, especially in this book. We have a whole system set up, and then we have a way of talking about it and thinking about it, and thinking about the way that things are, that very much just normalizes it. And it's like, oh yeah, that's just the way things are. And so, where was it going with that? So, systemic pedophilia is the idea that there are systems that are fucking our children, fucking them over at least, that are using children for the pleasure of adults, for the rather than doing what's in the best interest of the child, and always considering what's the child's needs. How can we invite children in? How can we have them participate? How can we ask them, how they want to live their lives, how they want things to be. Instead, we impose things on them, and we say, okay, this is what we need our children to be. This is what we want our children to be. This is how it will be easiest for adults and for us. And so, of course, Brendon is especially interested in the medical institution because that's mainly who perpetuates genital cutting of children in the United States, and also very interested in Judaism, and specifically Judaism because it's been by far the strongest opposition to the movement to end genital cutting and hacktivism. There are obviously other religious groups who have 100 times as much. I don't know if that's quite right. 10 times, 100 times, somewhere in that range, more genital cutting activity. Other religious groups and other groups, but the Jews in particular have been very, very extremely vocal about how this practice of cutting genitals is very, very important to them. And so Brendon is, I'm not going to go too far into that because that's not my specialty. If that's something that interests you, then by all means you may be interested in this. I'm always very timid when it comes to addressing the issue of Judaism because I try to be very diplomatic. And Brendon pulls no punches, as I said. He is not, his main goal is not to be diplomatic. I think it's to be effective, and to discover the truth and the way forward. So yeah, he addresses the medical institution, and basically what he does largely is tries to dismantle it intellectually. He really what's the word for it? Deconstruct is the word that they use in critical theory. And deconstructing just means that you take it and you analyze it. You analyze whose interest is this really serving, and how is this set up to benefit certain groups above other groups, and how do certain groups achieve power? How does the language that they use, how does the both the system and the way that the language is set up within the system help certain groups to achieve hegemony, which is another word for power. Essentially, it's being the dominant power in society means you are hegemonic, so, or have achieved hegemony. So social justice theory has a certain amount of hegemony in society right now. You could say in Western society, democracy is relatively hegemonic. Some might argue with that, but the idea of democracy is at least hegemonic. So that's what hegemony is. And you'll notice there's a lot of interesting words in here that Brendon introduces and tries to use, because the words are really important. And if you don't understand the words and what they mean, then you can't effectively think about something. You have to actually have the concepts, have the words, in order to formulate certain thoughts, because the words themselves are like building blocks out of which you're building the ideas. And the idea is that also one of the reasons this book is so important, and I really found this argument quite convincing, the hegemony that exists right now is, again, largely critical theory. Critical theory is dominant in businesses, it's dominant in the government. They literally forced me to take a class on it in school for my psychology degree, which has nothing to do. They force every student to take it in the previous school that I was at. Whether or not you like it, you have to learn modern social justice. It's called Diversity Seminar, but the essential ideas are those of critical theory. So, and I loved it. It was a great class. It was possibly my favorite class I took, actually. It was a good class. But the point is, where am I going with this? The hegemony is critical theory, and if you want to change society, then you should learn You should learn the language, the way of speaking, the way of thinking that the dominant culture is using, right? Medical associations have literally come out and said, we support social justice, we support Black Lives Matter, we support the end of racism, and they've made many statements that are explicitly grounded in critical theory. They've stated that it's from these critical theory authors, and so there's a very strong argument to be made that, and it's not even just Black Lives Matter, but it's other movements as well, which are all grounded in the same neo-Marxist theory. And by the way, it's not explicitly left-wing or progressive. I think it lends itself more naturally often to progressive causes for certain reasons that would take a while to get into. So I probably won't go there. Just because of the way that left-wing politics has a different fundamental ideology and way of looking at the world than conservative politics do. But you could argue that a lot of the tools in critical theory aren't really partial to, they're not exclusively limited to left-wing ideas, which is interesting. So even if you don't like the left wing or don't like left-wing ideas, you can still use critical theory for your cause. Again, this is very much a non-partisan book, I would say. It's about children. Like, if you hate children and think children should all die, then I guess, or should be tortured and whatever, then I guess it's not for you. You would be the other side of this issue. It's partisan for you, I guess. But for most people, hopefully it's non-partisan. So, goddamn, I can't get through all of this. I'm tired. I have shit to do. Epistemic injustice is important. Epistemic injustice is not having the language to express your experience. Brendon gives a lot of new language, not a lot of new concepts. My favorite part of the book was when he goes into all the different ways that circumcision it's a social stressor, it's a psychological stressor, and he really explains a lot of the things that I haven't heard anyone else talk about or explain the way he does before. If you're on the fence about getting this book, I would really encourage you to buy it just for that. And what's the chapter called? Cultural Stress, chapter 21. Read that chapter if nothing else. I think just buy it on Kindle if you can't afford the whatever $35 hardcover, and just read chapter 21. It's worth it. So good. Like Eric Klopper's play on sex and circumcision. When I watched that, and it was like how I felt watching him emote and express those feelings, because it's like, wow, I've never felt so understood in my whole life. Like, he's expressing exactly what I feel, and it's so cathartic. It's emotionally a good release to experience that. So, epistemic injustice is important because we don't have the words, and now we have the words, and now we have all these new ideas that we can express this with. Subaltern status is the idea that we have this inner child part of ourselves that has been abused and oppressed, and that we have learned to abuse and oppress within ourselves. And literally, children do not have a voice, especially young children, and this part of ourselves learns not to have a voice. So we learn to oppress this inner child part of ourselves, which is why we become shitty people, which is why adults suck. Everyone knows that children are a lot more fun than adults, and adults become kind of boring and awful. But not adults who have done a lot of healing and emotional work. You can maintain that youthful energy. It's just that so much of us have so much trauma and oppression we've just gradually internalized over the many years of constantly being forced to do things we hate, that eventually you internalize that. So that's subaltern status, intersectional identity. It's just, oh god, okay. There's a lot of good stuff here. Yeah, let me just see if there's... Oh, he goes into some really crazy shit here, guys, I'm telling you. If you've been traumatized by circumcision a lot, also, read the book slowly. I had to read it really fast because I kind of had some shit going on, and then had to get the review copy to him. And so I read the whole thing in 2 or 3 days. And that was too much. And I should have... It's not a book that you can read that fast. Unless you have no trauma around this at all, then you're probably okay. But I'd suggest take your time, digest it as you go. Don't read it in 2 days. It's pretty intense at points. La la la. Restorative justice was the other best chapter. So chapters 21 and 22. 22 is my favorite, second favorite two-digit number after 11, because 11 plus 11 is 22. So restorative justice, it's also the wish-making number. Whatever you wish for comes true if it's 1111. So, so restorative justice is a fantastic chapter. It includes everything I would hope. This is actually the only chapter, I think, where I advised him on the chapter, because he posted something about, hey, if you, like a year ago, like, if you wanted circumcision compensation, something to compensate you for your experience of circumcision and all the horrors of that, what would you want? And I listed the things I wanted, and I think he covered all of those things basically pretty close. Maybe he added something else too in addition, but it's like exactly what I would want, and I think what most people would want in compensation for this, and what we can expect. And by the way, that's shit that's actually happening right now. There's a very real thing. I just found out someone at my school is like a specialist in this, in like getting retribution or getting compensation for black people for all the horrible things they've experienced for centuries, and like what would be a fair compensation for that, to make it so that they're so that they feel better, and so that they feel emotionally, not emotionally, but also so that they're financially and on everything, on every level, feel like they've come to peace with the situation. Like, okay, you kind of fucked us over for hundreds of years, but then, you gave us enough money so that we had as much money as you, and you helped us, you apologized, and you did all these different things to show that you were sorry. It's like, what would that actually require for genital mutilation? And there's a lot of things, obviously, regenerative medicine, money, healing work. Those are my top three. I think there's other stuff in here too, but he really goes into it, and it's just such a good chapter, and he explains how, like, yeah, this is actually happening. Native Americans is another one that have actually started to get some land granted back to them. It's really cool stuff. So that's a good chapter. This book is intense. It's pretty. It's extreme, but it's very grounded. It's like, whoa, did he actually just fucking say that? But then he explains it, and he's like, he slowly builds it up. So you're like, okay, yeah, it makes sense, but at the same time, like, oh fuck, like, it's out there. It's pretty wild. And yeah, that's a lot of the points I really wanted to make about the book. Goes into meme theory a little bit, and how we got to spread this meme. So tell people about it. Read the book. It's important. It is important. It really is. It's a historic achievement, and it's just the beginning. And tactivism is one aspect of the children's movement. It's one aspect of children's justice, and we need to keep pushing on it. We need to keep pushing for all children to be protected from genital mutilation, as I've said many times. And to heal those victims as adults through emotional healing work, through compensation monetarily would be great. So far, no one's offered that to me, including my own parents. But I can only tolerate so much hatred in my life before I have to cave and, like, okay, fuck it, whatever. Where was I going with that? I don't know. We need to help these people who have been affected by this, and we need to prevent it from happening. And this book is a great step forward to do that. So, yeah. Oh man, I wrote so many notes here. Okay. So, check out the book. Let me know what you think of it. I'd love to have some conversations about this, to hear what other people think about it. Comment below. Yeah, tell me what you think. I'll give a link to the book below, and I was gonna link something else too, but I forgot what it was. So I'll link the book. Oh, I'll post my review below too, so you can see that if you want. But check it out and let me know what you think. All right. Hope you all have a good rest of your day, and talk to you later. Bye.